Okay, we have a 5-minute speaker next. Mr. or Ms. Kohler.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
My name's Catherine Kohler. We have 2 children who have gone through George R. Allen, Dalewood, and are presently at Westdale, and I taught at Dalewood for 9 years, so I'm very familiar with the schools in the area. Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank the members of the Dalewood ARC and board staff for the tremendous number of hours that they have devoted to this accommodation review. I have attended both public meetings and working committee meetings where I have observed the conscientious and careful analysis of all of the information that was presented. And I feel very strongly after all of the research done during this process that the best option is that of the ARC. That is to keep our 3 schools open. Some important considerations we've seen tonight, but I just review some of them. With regard to the 3 schools, based on EQAO scores, we see students achieving well in all 3 schools. We have a variety of successful programs that are offered in our schools. There's an impressive level of student engagement at all of our schools and extensive participation in extracurricular activities, as well as high level of parent achievement or engagement. The location of the schools allows the majority of students to walk to school. This increases students' level of physical activity and saves the board money in transportation costs. Walking to school offers a social benefit since children and their parents have the opportunity to make connections with others in their community on a daily basis. Another important consideration is the high value that many members of Prince Philip's Ainslie Wood neighborhood and those in George R. Allen's Westdale neighborhood place on a walkable community. They have chosen to live where they do because they value the ability to walk or cycle to their destinations. Finally, and this is really important for students' welfare, busing students puts them at a disadvantage in that they are unable to take part in before or after school extracurricular activities unless they're able to get to and from school by other means. It creates an inequity between those students who are able to walk or get a ride to school versus those students who are dependent on the bus. The locations of the schools are important and equitable. Prince Philip and George R. Allen are in distinctly different geographical areas, separated in large part by Main Street West. As you see on the map on page 13 of the ARC report, the location of the schools was well planned, with the 2 JK to 5 schools in the middle of their catchment areas, and with Dalewood Middle School located between the 2. The location of Prince Philip is an important consideration for the board because of the school's proximity to Canadian Martyrs Elementary School. In the event that Prince Philip were to be closed, parents in the Prince Philip area may choose to send their children to the separate school board so that their children would be able to walk to a neighborhood school instead of having to take a bus to George R. Allen. The fact that the Catholic High School St. Mary's is located in the center of the Ainslie Wood neighborhood may be an added incentive to switch to the separate board. This would mean a loss of students to our board. Our schools play an important role in attracting and retaining families in our community. If Prince Philip were to close, it would have a negative impact on the families living in Ainslie Wood. There is a considerable risk that families would be less attracted to a community without a school, and a greater number of houses in the area could be converted to student rentals because of the neighborhood's proximity to McMaster. This would reduce the number of students in our school, the schools in our community as well. So in terms of value to the student, the board, the community, and the local economy, it makes sense to keep Prince Philip, George R. Allen, and Dalewood open. It is also financially sound to keep these 3 schools open. I'm cognizant of the fact that the board has limited resources with which to maintain its schools, but the ARC recommendation has found that it is financially viable to keep all 3 schools. The ARC report points out on page 14 that recap data provides a life cycle flag for repair, not estimates based on actual observed needs in each of the schools. The ARC also points out that the Ministry of Education has recognized the limitations of using the recap data as a measure of facility condition and plans to refine the database methodology within the next few years. Therefore, I would argue that it was not an adequate indication of present and future renewal costs at our 3 schools. So, as indicated on page 19 in the report from the Dalewood ARC, if trustees vote to accept the ARC recommendation to keep our 3 schools open, this option is significantly more cost-effective than the staff recommendation since it requires, with no upgrades, it would have required no additional funding to initiate. Upon examination of the funding strategy tables in both the staff report and the ARC reports, we see that the estimate of the balance to fund the staff recommendation is approximately $1.955 million. There's a suggestion that this balance may be reduced by potential Ministry of Educational capital funding, approximately $2.44 million. My concern is that this funding is potential, not guaranteed. According to the ARC report, in the past year, the ministry only granted funding for 13.4% of the costs requested. In addition, according to the ARC report, with respect to staff funding estimates for renovations to George R. Allen, fencing, kindergarten playground relocation, and paving expenses have not been included in the staff capital expenses. At the bottom of the funding table on page 10 of the staff recommendation, it is noted, and I quote, "The values contained in this table represent preliminary estimates. Definitive cost estimates will be subject to an architect's assessment of the site, final design and size of the school, current construction costs at the time of construction, and determination of furniture, equipment, and resource material required." On page 11 of the staff report, it is noted, quote, "The board will be required to submit a business case to the Ministry of Education to obtain the balance of funds. The timing and scope of the work proposed will be subject to the availability of funding," end quote. These notes in the staff reports, okay, I'm almost finished, it'll be about 30 seconds. These notes in the staff report are a concern because they represent uncertainty about the definitive costs and renovations that would be done at George R. Allen. We also must remember that with the staff recommendation, it would be necessary to bus former Prince Philip students to George R. Allen. This new transportation cost has been estimated to be between $80,000 and $120,000 annually, and with the rising cost of gas, this cost is bound to increase in future years. Final paragraph. In closing, I thank the board for the opportunity to provide input into this very important process. I urge you, the trustees, to vote to keep all 3 of our schools open. After careful consideration of the value of Prince Philip, George R. Allen, and Dalewood to our students, board, community, and local economy, as well as an examination of the financial implications of both the ARC and staff recommendations, I feel very strongly that the ARC recommendation offers a cost-effective solution that meets the needs of our students and our community. Thank you for your indulgence. I tried, I was practicing way more quickly.
That was fast. Any questions for Trustee Turkstrach?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm just wondering where you got the data that the 13.4%.
It's in the element in the
ARC. Oh, it's in the ARC.
Okay. Yeah, it's on page.
Okay, that's what I want.
I can just check.
That's okay. I'll find it.
Oh, it's okay. Because I've got it.
Staff
I think I wrote the page reference.
And that came from the ARC
came
recommendation?
from the ARC. Yeah, it came from the ARC report. And
that was the fill rate of funding?
Here, it's on page 16, sorry. On page 16 of the ARC report.
And that's the fill rate for the funding? Is that
That was I'll take a look, I'll quote it exactly for you.
Yeah, thank you.
It says, it's a note at the end after the funding table.
Okay.
Note number 3, the ARC finds it unlikely that ministry funding will be received, given that in the past year the ministry received $4.47 billion in requests for capital funding, but only paid out $600 million that was not associated with specific capital priorities, for example, full-day kindergarten or self-funded. In other words, 13.4% of the costs requested were granted.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions for clarification? Looking for a motion to receive. Thank you, Trustee Orban, seconded by Trustee White. All those in favor? All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Yes.